everyone. My name is Chris Tackett. I'm the pianist for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to our services every week. We're all glad you're here with us. Happy last weekend in June. Happy Pride. Stick around after the postlude, and I'll be happy to tell you about the music I played.
Let us come together this morning, virtually and yet wholeheartedly, as we are connected through love and compassion and joined in our desire to make this world more just and more fair for all. Today's service is led by the Baja 4 community ministers. Our Baja churches include Borderlands UU in Amado, Sky Island UU in Sierra Vista, Mountain Vista UU in Northwest Tucson, and the UU Church of Tucson. While UU parish ministers get hired and paid by a congregation, we community ministers are ordained UU clergy committed to working in a broad spectrum of healing, environmental justice, or social justice ministries. I am Reverend Christiana Heide. I am affiliated with Mountain Vista UU, and I work as a part-time chaplain for Casa de la Luz Hospice.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Reverend Lisa McDaniel Hutchings, community minister in affiliation with Borderlands Unitarian Universalist. Throughout my ministry, I've been engaged in justice work here in Arizona. First with environmental justice with Arizona Interfaith Power and Light, then a variety of justice issues with UU Justice Arizona, known as UU Jazz, and now at the Baja 4 congregational level. I hope you'll join us in justice building.
Hello, my name is Reverend Carla Brockie. I'm a chaplain at Tucson Medical Center part-time, and I'm affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson. I'm really glad to be with you here today.
I invite you to light your home chalice, your personal or family chalice, if you have one, as I light our shared chalice with words from Orlando Brugnola. Flame, friend of our most ancient ancestors, we kindle you now to make you visible in this time. Yet in truth you burn always, in the unique worth of each person, in the imagination, in the turning of the heart to sorrow or joy, in the call to hope and in the call to justice. Burn bright before us, burn bright within us.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let a rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the darkness has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with the steady beat of not a weary feet, come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been won. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam on a bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on this way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, Lord God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our promised land.
It's story time. Here is the story of a truly great Unitarian woman, which you may not have heard. We need to hear more of these stories. Do you know what slavery is? It's when one human being thinks they own another human being. A slave has no rights of their own, nothing that belongs to them, not even their family members. All belongs to the slave owner. Not so long ago in our country, this was a regular thing, especially in the southern states, when white slave owners held black persons as property to do their work. Being a slave would be a very hard, heartbreaking, sorrowful, enraging kind of life. I want you to know the story of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Frances was a girl whose parents were freed black slaves. She was born free in a world full of slavery in 1825, almost 200 years ago. Her mother died when she was only 3 years old, and she went to Baltimore to live with her Aunt Henrietta and Uncle William Watkins, an abolitionist who promoted freeing the slaves. He was the head of a school of free black children, the Academy for Negro Youth. In those days in the southern states, it was illegal for black children to learn to read. And in the northern states, there were very few schools for black children. She was lucky to get to go to school at all, and she loved it. At the age of 14, she went to work as a household servant to a Quaker family, and there she had access to a large private library of books. She read and read and read. She began to write poetry, and some of them were published in the newspapers and magazines. At the age of 21, she was able to publish her first book, a collection of poems, Autumn Leaves. This was a great achievement for any woman at the time, especially a black woman. In 1850, the Fugitive Slave Law was passed, making it unsafe for any black person in Maryland. Frances went to Ohio, where she taught at Union Seminary, a black school affiliated with her faith, an African Methodist Episcopal Church, AME. A year later, she moved to Philadelphia, where she joined the First Unitarian Church and got involved in abolitionist work. She traveled widely as a speaker for the abolition of slavery and used the money she earned to support the Underground Railroad, helping slaves to escape out of the South into freedom. You may remember Harriet Tubman was a great leader in the Underground Railroad. Frances went on to spend her life writing and working for social justice, including women's right to vote and black persons' right to vote, and helping poor black people in the South after the Civil War during Reconstruction. That time of Reconstruction was just as hard for black people as was the time of slavery. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper is known as the mother of black journalism, among many other honors. She wrote many books and was a great leader in many leading progressive organizations of the day. She is a shining example of living your faith in the face of incredible barriers, barriers which many of us have never known. Let us remember her as one of our bravest and smartest Unitarian ancestors.
I want to share a reading that I found on Twitter about 10 days ago from Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. She said, "This has been a week with hopeful winds and powerful momentum building for real systemic change. The uprisings across the United States continue to grow. The Minneapolis City Council voted to defund police, and the Supreme Court just issued a historic ruling making clear LGBTQ people are protected from workplace discrimination under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It has also been a devastating week of unspeakable violence against Black lives. We lift up the names of these loved ones whose lives were taken just in the last few days. Oluwatoyin Salau, Rashard Brooks, Rhea Milton, Dominique Remy Fells, Robert Fuller, and Malcolm Harsh. It matters that we honor our grief and make time to rest. It matters that we celebrate the wins, and it matters that we don't let up. We have got to keep naming, showing up, and organizing for justice, for liberation, for the lives and dignity of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, trans, and non-binary siblings. And we've got to keep moving forward, liberating practices of theology and community that reckon with how deeply our people are under threat while embodying practices of resilience, compassion, interconnectedness, and deep care that are so needed in these times.
Unitarian Universalists are blessed with an ever-evolving theology. We draw wisdom from many sources, the words and deeds of visionary leaders, the full range of world religions, science, earth-centered traditions, and our own experiences of mystery and wonder. And we are unified by the covenant we have with other congregations, our Unitarian Universalist principles. Even now, as Reverend Christiana mentioned, the Unitarian Universalist Association is considering a possible 8th principle focused on building a diverse, multicultural community by acting to dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Our principles guide us in how we will act with one another, both inside our churches and in our communities, cities, states, nation, and the world beyond. We find ourselves in a time of global pandemic and national political and racial unrest. These conditions are extremely concerning and unsettling. Those of us who identify as white people are participants in a shared culture, and we are socialized into shared ways of thinking. We have grown up in an American society that from its very beginning was developed by white people and serves white people. And because we've grown up in this society, it feels like life as usual to us. So whites are often unaware of our participation in systems that oppress people of color. The police killings of our Black brothers and sisters and mass protests in the last several weeks serve as a wake-up call. This moment in our history calls us to engage. I know that members and friends of our congregations feel called to address one of many different justice issues: hunger, education, immigration, gun control, poverty, prison reform, climate change, and more. But forms of oppression are linked. Blacks and other people of color are more likely to suffer poverty and hunger, receive lower quality education, live in the most polluted parts of our cities, go to prison proportionately more often, and have the doors of immigration to the United States closed to them. So I ask you, the white members and friends of our Baja 4 congregations, to live into our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. To each commit to learning about our own roles in race relations. Some of you have read White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism by Robin DiAngelo. I believe that this book is the perfect introduction to racism work. Designed for progressives, White Fragility gives a context of racism in American history, discusses vulnerabilities and challenges of white people in confronting racism, and offers a paradigm shift for those of us wanting to move forward. It's not uncommon for whites to feel guilty as our awareness is raised about how things really work in our country. In her book, DiAngelo shares a quote from Audre Lorde, an African-American writer, feminist, womanist, librarian, and civil rights activist. DiAngelo, toward the end of her book, says that Audre Lorde eloquently addressed her thoughts on white guilt at a conference in 1981, where she said, I cannot hide my anger to spare you guilt, nor hurt feelings, nor answering anger, for to do so insults and trivializes all our efforts. Guilt is not a response to anger. It's a response to one's own actions or lack of action. If it leads to change, then it can be useful, since it is then no longer guilt, but the beginning of knowledge. Yet all too often, guilt is just another name for impotence, for defensiveness, destructive of communication. It becomes a device to protect ignorance and the continuation of things the way they are, the ultimate protection for changelessness. So may we let go of guilt, apathy, fear of making mistakes, or whatever is holding us back, and live into building racial justice, which, like living into any of our Unitarian Universalist principles, will require of us lifelong learning and growing. When white people ask D'Angelo what to do about racism, she asks them, what has enabled you to be a full, educated, professional adult and not know what to do about racism? Considering the question seriously can help plan where to put one's energy. My recommendation is to read White Fragility first. If my answer to D'Angelo's question is that I was not educated about racism, then I know that I have to get educated. I can read books, articles, websites, or listen to podcasts about Black history and racism in the United States, especially since that history was not taught in our schools. Or on the Equal Justice Initiative website, Brian Stevenson, the author of Just Mercy, has a documentary that tells the story of his work for true justice that includes some history of Black racism in the United States, as well as legal defenses that he has pursued as an attorney. Or if I want to learn about systems of oppression like police brutality, I can go to the 8 Can't Wait website to learn about what policing policies must change immediately. You can check your city's progress with these changes, or if your city is not listed, investigate further. Alternatively, if my answer to the question is that I don't know people of color, I will have to build relationships. I can reach out with humility and curiosity to people of color at work or the gym or any other place where we may share an interest. Or I can connect with partner organizations like Black Lives Matter, blm.org. Black Lives Unitarian Universalism is blacklivesuu.com. The prevailing wisdom for building longer-term solutions is to identify groups like these, led by impacted communities, and then listen to their needs and follow their leadership. Or I can join with the Tucson branch of Showing Up for Racial Justice, SURGE. They're offering a Zoom conference called Reflecting on and Healing from White Supremacy. Even though it's full for the first date, they are looking for additional dates to offer it again. You can still sign up. Tucson Surge is a small, all-volunteer core team that meets regularly to create ways to call in other white people to work together for racial justice. And finally, if my answer to D'Angelo's question is that there are no people of color in my environment, then I will need to get out of my comfort zone and change my environment. Many of the approaches in this area may have to wait until people feel safe going out again, but they include things like eating at the soul food restaurant in Arivaca and meeting the family that runs it, or taking a public bus ride through South Tucson, or attending an event at the Dunbar Pavilion, or taking a tour of the borderlands. While Arizona is peaking in the COVID-19 pandemic now, many of us still feel required to stay at home as much as possible, especially those with vulnerable health. So much downtime at home can feel boring, depressing, and energy robbing. But never fear. Most of my examples you can do from home And a group of us is thinking about possible offerings for Baja 4 members and friends. Please keep your eyes on your email. Sometime during the next month, there will be an interest survey that will help us discern where best to put our energy and what kind of online programming may be most compelling for you all. As we Unitarian Universalists continue to wrestle with reinventing church, both inside church walls and outside in the broader community, we must stay grounded in our faith, but nimble in our practice. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called now to learn more about the Black experience and history in our nation, to build more relationships with and in support of people of color, and to step outside of our comfort zone to build the diverse, multicultural community without systems of oppression, that community that we dream of. May we make it so through our living.
I am waking up to find my world between the dying and being reborn. I see what is and I see what could be. Can't close my eyes again and go back to sleep. Fill my days with blessed unrest and my nights with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide. How can I change our course? Just a lonely voice. Wish I could lose myself in all the noise. But if we all would rise, a generation proud and with a mighty song, turn this world around. Fill my days with blessed unrest and my nights with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide. Fill my days with blessed unrest and my nights with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide. Ancestors all behind and before me every child, I bring the power of the long and broken line. So when our time is through, I want to know, did what we came to do for the future ones. So in our darkest days, may we all be strong and give our lives so life may go on. Fill my days with blessed unrest and my nights with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel. Fill my days with blessed unrest and my nights with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide. Fill my days with blessed unrest and my nights with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide. Fill my days with blessed unrest and my nights with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide. Fill my days with blessed unrest and my nights with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide.
Black lives matter. Some say no, all lives matter. But if Black lives do not matter, then all lives? apparently do not matter after all. Police killings of black and brown people in our country have become the cause of uproar and demonstrations in every state and in many other countries as well. Black lives do matter, and there's a reason to lift up black and brown lives. Ever since the first European ship landed on these shores, Native American lives have not mattered. And then Africans were stolen from their continent, and those who survived the journey were sold as property to the highest bidder. Once slavery ended, other ways were found to subdue and disadvantage black and brown people up to this very day. Racism, that's an ugly word, right? The way that word is used in our culture means someone who consciously looks down on another race with disdain and considers them worthless, and then purposefully disadvantages them. So they're racist people who are bad and non-racist people who are good. Let me tell you now, that is not so. Now, I am not an expert on racism. I'm not even an expert on my own racism. It took quite a while before I was willing to see it and acknowledge it to myself. And at first, shame and self-loathing followed. And then I studied, I listened, I learned more. This whole society has an underlying racism problem. We're swimming in a racist society. We breathe it in from the moment we're born in our families, our schools, workplaces, media. It is everywhere. If you hear someone say, "That's a dangerous neighborhood," what do you picture? Yes, more black and brown people. Is pigmentation really that dangerous? Or is it just that they get paid less, get policed and incarcerated more, and are by and large kept from education, home ownership, and success? If we could ask a fish, "How's the water today?" If it could answer, I know what it would say. What water? When we're so immersed in something, we do not see it unless we make ourselves look. The death of George Floyd finally got people's attention, and it seemed like a whole mass of folks woke up and decided, no, watching a man get killed by police in a 9-minute video was more than we were willing to tolerate. Good. About time. Many people are demonstrating, especially now, that in most metropolitan areas, videos are showing up of police killing men, including Tucson. It's not okay. I am glad people are out there with a strong message and signs. Black and brown lives do matter. Our first UU principle affirms the worth and dignity of every person. Of course, our view is clear and we stand firm. In the middle of a pandemic, however, many of us cannot risk standing on corners with signs, among others. We're holed up in our homes and hope to not catch a virus that many of us might not survive due to our existing conditions. Does that leave us out of this world-changing movement? No way. The biggest change happens within. First of all, changing the definition of racism so we don't just keep defending ourselves, trying to prove we're not racist. That's a waste of time. Everyone is affected by systemic racism in which we live. It does not matter what proof I have that I'm a good person and not racist. Unfortunately, I am a good person with an unfortunate racism issue. And my guess is you might be too. Seeing it in our world, in ourselves, our surroundings, even our congregations, calling ourselves on thoughts, phrases, actions that reflect racism, and then gently forgiving ourselves so we can lovingly let go of these toxic thoughts and behaviors. That is how we heal. Once we give up the destructive and divisive game of who's a bad racist and who's a good non-racist, once we see the racist system in which we live and breathe, only then can we stop it, our thoughts and actions all around. Then, for instance, we know how to vote. We don't need to ask, has this person ever done or said anything racist? Well, yes, of course they have. They breathe the same racist air we do. Instead, we can ask, has this person changed over time? Have they evolved? Do they have a record of speaking about and treating Black people with utter respect, affirming their worth and dignity with words and actions? Then it is easy to see who will help us change this world. So, dear Baja for UUs, in these precious UU congregations that I know and love so dearly, let us not be afraid of racism within or all around us. Let us call it out, one thought, one political candidate, one vote at a time. Let us commit one breath at a time to live out our first principle, the worth and dignity of every person. Maybe we will soon be ready for an eighth principle that has long been proposed. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community, by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be Ashe.
Please join me in a time of meditation and reflection, beginning with the words of Rebecca Parker. This is my country. Love calls me beyond denial and dissociation. It is not enough to think of racism as a problem of human relations, to be cured by me and others like me, treating everyone fairly, with respect and without prejudice. Racism is more. It is a problem of segregated knowledge, mystification of facts, anesthetization of feeling, exploitation of people, and violence against the community of our humanity. My commitment to racial justice is both on behalf of the other, my neighbor, whose well-being I desire, and for myself, to whom the gift of life has been given but not yet fully claimed. I struggle neither as a benevolent act of social concern, nor as a repentant act of shame and guilt, but as an act of desire for life, of passion for life, of insistence on life, fueled by both love for life and anger in the face of the violence that divides human flesh. End quote. In these turbulent times, Unitarian Universalism is again being called to wake up to the reality of systematic oppression, even as it lives and breathes in our own organization and in our hearts. We can see the frightening reality of what blindness has done to society and to the planet. In Reimagining Church, we are called to seek greater wholeness for our institutions, but first of all, for ourselves. Join me for a few moments of reflection on what that means for you. What are you called to? Frances Ellen Watkins Harper said, speaking of women, but true for all, her conscience should be enlightened, her faith in the true and right established, and scope given to her heaven-endowed and God-given faculties. What is your faith becoming? What are you called to do with your heaven-endowed faculties? Blessings.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the mile of commitment sets our mind and souls ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. With the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, and the promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
May you continue your transformation in faith. May we help one another in our transformation. May we help with the transformation of the world together in faith.
I invite you to extinguish your chalice as I extinguish ours with these words by the Reverend Kendall Gibbons. Out of a community of diverse heritage and belief, we've come together today to share our hope and to create good in the world. The prophets of all traditions and times have taught that we are called to mercy, generosity, and mutual care, and that to be great is to serve. We know that there can be no enduring happiness for humanity so long as suffering and want go unrelieved. Until all may be sheltered, none of us is truly at home. May the power of our faith sustain us in this work, that we may be the hands of holy creativity and justice, and together build a better world. Amen, and blessed be.
us march on indeed until victory is won. The prelude this morning was a piece, the second of 3 barcarolles of American composer Ned Rorem. Ned was active from the end of the Second World War. He was an expatriate in Paris, studying with Nadia Boulanger and living quite the scandalous lifestyle, if you know anything about him. He wrote very honestly and unflinchingly in his Paris and then later New York diaries. He returned to the United States in the 60s. He settled eventually in Nantucket, where he actually still lives. He's 96 this summer. Still active, still writing, turned out a couple new pieces of music in the last couple of years, and he still occasionally shows up. We get new essays from him once in a great while. One of the great gay American composers of the 20th century, and now increasingly the 21st. Thank you so much.